Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size, only $79.99. The Percal queen size, normally $89.98. Your wholesale price, $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to mypillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. mypillow.com. Promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. Welcome in on this Wednesday, hump day, as we are on the downhill side to the weekend. I love it. President Trump was at the UN in New York City yesterday addressing world leaders on a number of issues. We have the details in today's show. Also, First Lady Melania Trump used the United Nations General Assembly stage yesterday to also deliver a message, a warning, and a call to action. Children must be protected as technology races ahead. The Trump Golf Club gunman was found guilty after his assassination attempt and then tried to stab himself in the neck in the courtroom upon hearing the verdict. Details in today's show. Former Vice President Kamala Harris is on the circuit promoting her new book, and she's not too kind to her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Black Lives Matter associates have been under fire over the past couple of years because they took in millions and millions of dollars with not a whole lot to show for it. One was just sentenced this week to 18 months in federal prison after spending thousands of pandemic-related money and other money raised for vacations, fine dining, housing expenses. We have those details on the latest fraud from BLM as well.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
It was a pretty busy day at the United Nations yesterday as over 150 world leaders convened to discuss wars, funding, and the global economy. A lot of money was talked about. In a very fiery address before the United Nations General Assembly, President Donald Trump delivered what the White House is calling a powerful rejection of destructive globalism, urging world leaders to return to principles of national sovereignty, secure borders, and cultural preservation. Speaking from the UN podium, President Trump laid out a sweeping indictment of global institutions, criticizing what he called the international community's failure to stop mass migration, child trafficking, terrorism, and even biological warfare. He hit on a lot of different topics. In one of the most pointed lines of his address, the president declared, quote, the entire globalist concept of asking successful industrialized nations to inflict pain on themselves and radically disrupt their entire societies must be rejected completely and totally, and it must be immediate. Now, he, of course, was talking about illegal immigration. The president took direct aim at the United Nations itself, accusing the body of creating new global problems rather than solving existing ones.
It's actually creating new problems for us to solve. The best example is the number one political issue of our time, the crisis of uncontrolled migration. It's uncontrolled. Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders.
As you heard, and that was just a small portion of it, the president drew a stark line between what he called lawful sovereignty and dangerous open border ideologies, condemning the global migration agenda as inherently evil and responsible for fueling child trafficking operations around the world, not to mention drug trafficking as well. The president also reaffirmed his commitment to defending free speech, religious liberty, and national identity, and urged other nations to follow suit, saying that the world must now come together to defend its people, not political elites. He emphasized that true peace, in his view, comes not from global agreements or international prizes, but from preserving life and protecting one's homeland. He said a dramatically better future is within our reach, but to get there, we must reject the failed approaches of the past. The speech drew swift praise from allies and conservative leaders, while his critics accused the president of isolating the U.S. at a time of rising international tensions. Some Democrats said the president's speech was reckless and inflammatory. Still, the White House says this was a message the world needs to hear. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that his relationship with President Donald Trump has strengthened, noting their teams are now more closely aligned on intelligence and battlefield assessments. He was talking with Fox News' Brett Baier when he welcomed Trump's remarks after the United Nations meeting, underscoring Trump's pledge to back Ukraine to what he said the very end.
I think we have a better relation than before. And I think we didn't have a close relation because we didn't have maybe time. I don't know other reasons. It's good that we have often phone calls and meetings. And I think the fact that Putin was lying to President Trump so many times also made a difference between us.
President Zelensky said that Trump recognized the need for greater pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin and stressed that ceding Ukrainian territory would not halt Russian aggression. Now, there were some fireworks with the French. French President Emmanuel Macron called for global unity at the United Nations, drew a sharp rebuke from Senator Ted Cruz, who accused him of hypocrisy and backing unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state despite Hamas's October 7th attack. Macron posted his call for unity on X, writing this, saying, "We were 51 in San Francisco. Today we're 193 member states in this United Nations General Assembly. And yet we are dividing. The fracturing of our world is holding back our collective ability to resolve major conflicts and meet our common challenges." He added, "Now more than ever, we must restore the spirit of cooperation that prevailed 80 years ago." Senator Ted Cruz fired back with his own post, writing, "Unity? This from the same leader who just proclaimed, because France is tragically dripping in anti-Semitism, that the UN should reward Hamas for October 7th by unilaterally declaring a Palestinian state?" Macron opened his week at the UN General Assembly by announcing France would formally recognize a Palestinian state, seeking to reset the Gaza agenda and assert France's role on the world stage. Also, Colombia President Gustavo Petro used his General Assembly speech to blast President Trump's anti-drug policy as violent, ineffective, and rooted in domination rather than public health. President Petro argued that Colombia has achieved record cocaine seizures and extraditions under his government, yet Trump, quote, decertified the country, a move he called unjust and politically motivated. Look, everything's politically motivated. Those speeches were full of political motivation, right? Petro denounced U.S. missile strikes in the Caribbean that he said killed unarmed Colombian youths under the false pretense of stopping traffickers. He insisted his approach, voluntary crop substitution and anti-trafficker enforcement, was more humane and effective than militarized crackdowns. He also alleged that President Trump's foreign policy towards Colombia, Venezuela, and the Caribbean area was influenced by Colombian politicians connected to drug mafias and paramilitaries. He continued by saying that the anti-drug policy was not meant to stop cocaine going into the U.S. Petro said you shouldn't look at the drugs. You should look at who has the power and who dominates. Well, look, they're coming from your country. They're coming from your region of the world. You need to step up, and you need to help. You need to help fight these drugs. And no, these are not just innocent young men out there in these boats who have hundreds of pounds, if not thousands of pounds of cocaine and fentanyl. Meanwhile, First Lady Melania Trump used the UN General Assembly stage to deliver a warning and a call for action. saying that children must be protected as technology races ahead. Mrs. Trump unveiled her new initiative, Fostering the Future Together, in her remarks, a global coalition of nations dedicated to advancing children's well-being in the digital era through education, innovation, and technology. During her speech, the First Lady urged leaders to see childhood imagination not as trivial, but as a rehearsal for innovation later in their life as they grow into adults. She said, as children, we all played marbles, flew paper airplanes, and ran with a string in our hand watching our kites take off. Great minds have turned marbles into microchips, paper airplanes into drones, and kites into satellites. The First Lady was a hit with her remarks at the UN. It was a busy, busy week. And aren't you glad that President Donald Trump is at the UN taking up for our country, defending our country's stance in the world? Let's be honest, those summer vacations and backyard barbecues added some extra pounds, right? But instead of feeling guilty or falling further behind, it's time to reset, drop the weight, and get back in control. The solution isn't a shot. Real lasting weight loss starts with your mind, not your mouth. At PhD Weight Loss, Dr. Ashley Lucas and her team help you uncover the real reasons behind your weight gain so that you can reprogram the way you think about food forever. PhD clients lose up to a third of their body weight without ever taking a drug. I know because I lost 33 pounds with PhD Weight Loss. Through real food, behavioral coaching, and proven science, your body can become a natural fat-burning machine. Why risk spending thousands on shots that strip away muscle, come with dangerous side effects, and leave most people regaining 60% of the weight within a year? With PhD, you'll activate your body's natural appetite control, burn fat safely, and stay in control. Even if you're already on Ozempic, PhD can help you transition off while still losing weight. Take the first step today. Call 864-644-1900 or visit myphdweightloss.com. Over the past couple of weeks, I've seen a lot of hate online. People who, Charlie Kirk's not the guy he said he was. You got to watch him. He's a fraudster, taking in millions of dollars. It has particularly come from, and I hate to say this, but the African-American community. There are a couple of activists in my area that I see on Facebook particularly who are talking about, Black Lives Matter has accomplished a lot more than Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA would have ever accomplished. I've never been a big fan of Black Lives Matter because just on the surface, forget some of the things that they're involved in, but just on the surface, they've always been opportunists to me. They've always been there just to see how it could benefit some of the key members. Recent example, and this is confirmation, this is showing what they're really all about. A Black Lives Matter, and this is according to the New York Post, a particular leader, if you will, of Black Lives Matter has scammed donors out of thousands of dollars to fund her own extravagant lifestyle, and she's been convicted and has now been sentenced, but only for 18 months. Monica Cannon Grant was federally charged alongside her husband, Clark Grant, this was back in 2022, for 27 counts of 18 fraud-related crimes connected with Black Lives Matter. She's been one of the leaders from day one. She's 44 years old. She agreed to a plea bargain in exchange for a dismissal of 9 counts related to mortgage fraud allegations. She pleaded guilty just this past Monday to 18 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, and tax violations. She's a fraudster. She received the bare minimum sentence of 18 months after swindling thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in donations to pay for her lavish personal expenses. She doesn't care about the success of Black Lives Matter or its mission. Her husband, sadly, was killed in a motorcycle crash in Massachusetts in March of 2023. The couple operated Violence in Boston, Inc. It's a nonprofit in 2017 with the stated purpose of improving the quality of life and outcomes of individuals from disenfranchised communities. The nonprofits raised over $1 million, received nearly $60,000 in pandemic relief funds to provide meals for underprivileged people, according to the Boston Globe. This was one of a series of nonprofits set up that was an arm of Black Lives Matter. They had that inside track to the Biden administration and was handed over millions and millions of dollars. In this case, particularly, Monica Cannon Grant was charged alongside her husband, her deceased husband, for 27 counts of fraud related to these funds. Instead of the money going to where it was supposed to go to help people, it was spent on meals at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. And these weren't meals for people that the nonprofit was serving. These were meals for herself, her husband, and their family and friends. It also paid for vacations, trips to a nail salon, a car, and rent on the family's apartment. The couple was additionally accused of hiding their income to fraudulently acquire $12,600 in rental assistance funds. So not only was she getting this money, this grant money, pandemic grant money, to help fund her nonprofit, she also was hiding her income that she was getting so that she could get rental assistance for her housing. This was around the same time that they were buying a new home. You can't make this stuff up. And I'm sure she probably is leading the pack in criticizing Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. Cannon Grant was also accused of paying herself $2,788 a week from her charity starting in October 2020, contradicting public statements and her report to the IRS that she received no salary. Oh, she was just doing it out of the goodness of her heart. She was doing this to help the people. Listen to this text that she sent to her husband back in March of 2021, according to authorities, according to part of the court case. She wrote, "Unemployment caught my ASS. They asked me to provide documents by June. Unless I provide them, I'll have to pay it all back." Well, I don't know if she's paid it back yet, but she's going to have to spend some time in jail because of it. The 2020 Bostonian of the Year was also accused of directing co-conspirators to apply for public and private grants for her charity and spending that money on living expenses. Again, this is just a pattern of how people like Monica Cannon Grant and her husband Clark Grant think that the government is there to fleece, that the government was there. And remember, keep in mind of what was happening during the pandemic. Joe Biden was giving away money like it was candy, billions and billions of dollars. And this network, and I'm sure there's probably some association with the Democrat Party, this network realized, hey, we've got a gravy train here. Let's take advantage of it. So they were helping one another. They were setting up these nonprofits who really had nothing to do with helping people. They were helping themselves. Again, donations spent on meals at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, vacations, paying herself $2,788 a week, claiming to the IRS that she wasn't paying herself out of the nonprofit. A $10,400 grant from an unnamed department store meant to feed hungry children was actually laundered through a church to pay back rent. This is criminal. She should be spending a lot more time than 18 months in prison. Assistant U.S. Attorney Adam Deitch said prosecutors were prepared to prove these hefty allegations true. Deitch said the nonprofit was awarded a $6,000 grant from Suffolk District Attorney's Office in 2019 after claiming it was used to send at-risk young men to a retreat in Philadelphia. Not only did they take money from the government in pandemic funds, they literally was working with the Suffolk District Attorney's Office. They were working with the prosecutors who now are prosecuting them. According to Deitch, none of the funds were used to take young men from Roxbury on a trip to Philadelphia. Of course they weren't. They paid her rent. They paid her nail salon. They paid her meals at Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. Prosecutors say the con artist couple used the money on a vacation to Maryland, fine dining, groceries, Walmart purchases. Wonder where the fine dining was, because that's not Bubba Gump Shrimp. The Daily Mail previously contacted Cannon Grant for comment about the allegations, but she responded with anger and F-bombs, saying, "Respectfully, F you," she said in an email. I hope she stays in jail for the full 18 months. Received an email from Jen in Taylor's who kind of summed some things up I wanted to share with you. She says, "Joey, the First Amendment keeps the government from making laws against speech. It does not prevent private corporations from having standards and holding their employees accountable for those standards. I wish people wouldn't get those things confused." You're so right, Jen. That's a great explanation of this whole debate that we have been hearing on freedom of speech. You can say anything you want as long as you're willing to accept the consequences. Jimmy Kimmel is finding that out. A dramatic verdict out of Florida. It's one that's probably going to go down in history. Jurors yesterday found Ryan Ruth guilty on all charges for his attempted assassination of then presidential candidate Donald Trump at President Trump's West Palm Beach Golf Club back in September of 2024. It was a unanimous verdict after nearly 3 weeks of testimony, evidence presented, and hours of deliberation by the jury. The moment the decision was read in court, chaos broke out. Ruth, who's 59 years old, reportedly tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen right there in the courtroom before U.S. Marshals were able to wrestle him to the ground. His daughter, Sarah, stood up screaming at the jury, accusing the trial of being rigged and unleashing an obscenity-laced rant while jurors were still seated. It was chaos. It was dramatic. It was stuff that you would see in a courtroom drama movie. The charges against Ruth were as serious as they come. Attempting to assassinate a major presidential candidate, assaulting a federal officer, the Secret Service officer there, and several firearms offenses. Together, they carry a potential life sentence. Now, prosecutors left no room for doubt in this case. They presented digital trails, call logs, text messages, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence that tied Ruth to the plot. Jurors were told about the 17 recognizant trips that he made to Trump's golf course, the SKS semi-automatic rifle he bought and then stashed with 19 rounds loaded, the sniper's nest he built overlooking the 6th and 7th holes, and his DNA and fingerprints were found on the weapon and all of this gear. So it's going to be hard for him, or was hard for him, to convince jurors that it wasn't his gun, that he had nothing to do with it, and he wasn't attempting to assassinate then candidate Donald J. Trump. The government's case was pretty clear. This wasn't some publicity stunt. An assistant U.S. attorney, Christopher Brown, told the jury, "The evidence has shown one thing and one thing only. The defendant wanted Donald Trump dead." Now, the courtroom sketches from the trial kind of tell the story. He was a defiant defendant. He represented himself, which, you know, he was guilty. He knew he was guilty. He probably was not going to get a better outcome had he paid a lot of money for an attorney. I'm not sure he had the money for it. But the old saying, you're a fool when you have a fool for a lawyer when you represent yourself, seems to be the case here. He questioned just 3 witnesses. He offered no real evidence in his own defense. Compare that to the prosecution's 38 witnesses, hundreds of pieces of physical and digital evidence, and you can kind of see why this verdict was decisive, right? Why it was unanimous. One chilling piece that stuck with jurors. Ruth had written a manifesto. He addressed it, "Dear World," offering money to anyone willing to complete the job. He wanted Donald Trump dead. I don't know why he hates Donald Trump as he does, but it's plain and simple. His intentions were, and thank goodness for that Secret Service agent being alert, but his intentions were to take Donald Trump out of the presidential race on that September day. Only a portion of that document was allowed into evidence, though. It underscored what prosecutors called his clear intent. This case also shined a spotlight on what investigators call a sniper tradecraft. Ruth allegedly spent nearly 10 hours hidden in a makeshift hideout, using steel plates for ballistic protection and fences for stability, waiting just for the right moment, waiting for Donald Trump to come down the fairway playing that specific hole on his golf course. This guy obviously had been watching the president, knew his game, knew how he approached the holes, knew his schedule. Somehow knew that he was going to be playing golf that day. Now, the Secret Service, I don't think they broadcast Trump's schedule when he's planning to play a round of golf. I don't think they do. This guy somehow had figured it out and was waiting. Now, yes, he'd been waiting for hours, but still, to narrow it down to that particular day. Bottom line is this. The jury saw through his excuses, and they convicted him on every single count. They saw his intention. They knew what his heart was. They could see through his hatred of now President Donald Trump. They knew that had that Secret Service agent not been alert and not seen the movement in the bushes, he very well could have taken Donald Trump out. It's chilling to think about that, because when Trump had gotten on the green at that particular hole, he wouldn't have been too far away. It would have been a fairly easy shot for this guy to have taken. Now he faces life in prison. His sentencing date has not been set yet, but one thing is for certain. This was an assassination attempt on a former president, soon to be current president, and the leading candidate, of course, for president at the time. And the justice system treated it with the gravity that it deserved. And in a country already shaken, of course, by the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk just last week, this verdict sends a powerful message. Political violence has no place in America. We're going to track you down. We're going to prevent you from doing this, and we're going to send you to jail probably for the rest of your life. While we're talking about the presidential campaign last year, Kamala Harris is back in the headlines. This time not for a speech or a campaign stop, but for her book, of course. Her memoir, 107 Days, drops more behind-the-scenes details about her failed 2024 run. And let me tell you, it reads less like a victory lap, more like a post-mortem. One of the most striking sections, according to just some of the excerpts that I've been able to scan through, Ms. Harris recounts the vice presidential debate between her running mate, goofy Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and then Senator JD Vance. In her new book, she admits that she was counting on the governor to be the closer, the guy who could land the final blows against the Trump-Vance ticket, since she wasn't going to have another debate with Trump. Instead, she writes that she sat next to her husband, Doug, totally frustrated, as Governor Walz smiled and nodded along with what she called Vance's fake bipartisanship. Her words, "I moaned to Doug, what is happening?" Not exactly a ringing vote of confidence for her own ticket, is it? She even said that she told the television screen, talking to her TV, "You're not there to make friends with a guy who is attacking your running mate." Can you just visualize that? Can you see then Vice President Kamala Harris, knowing that she was about to go down in defeat and watching that goofy, you remember the debate. He did horribly. JD Vance just ate his lunch. But can you see Kamala Harris sitting there talking to her own TV, frustrated at her running mate? She describes Vance as a shapeshifter, mild-mannered, and aw shucks on stage, but a sharp political knife fighter. Meanwhile, Walz got bogged down defending his record as governor, which was the whole strategy from the Trump-Vance team. She points to the infamous blunder when Walz, pressed about claiming he was in Hong Kong during the Tiananmen Square protest, started talking about biking in Nebraska instead of just admitting he mixed the dates up. Again, it was a total disaster. Harris writes in her book that at that moment she cringed, and apparently Saturday Night Live nailed the parody so well that she said it was uncanny in capturing her and Doug's reaction. Harris does try to soften the blow, writing that she reassured Governor Walz that the election wasn't lost on account of that debate and that didn't move polling. She admits that she struggled with the toll of national politics, that he hated what she called the unfair attacks, and that it wore on his family. Look, Tim Walz's horrible debate performance had nothing to do with them losing in a landslide victory for Donald Trump. Kamala Harris had already sealed the fate of her presidential run over the previous almost 4 years of doing absolutely nothing, of not taking care of the border, of her constant word salads, of her just goofiness. Nobody in America, except a few of her hardcore Democrat, lefty-leaning people who knew no better, nobody trusted that lady to put her in the Oval Office. So it didn't matter about that debate. Didn't matter about her debate. She was going to lose anyway because the American people simply do not trust that she can lead our country. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. Okay, so did you watch Jimmy Kimmel last night? Come on, be honest. Raise your hand. I'm watching. I can see you. If you didn't, you're not alone. Many did not watch, not because they didn't care to, but because in some cases they didn't have the opportunity to. Big developments last night in the return of Jimmy Kimmel, the saga. And this one is a direct slap in the face to Disney from two of the country's largest broadcast groups. Yesterday afternoon, as the fanfare was growing about the return of Jimmy Kimmel, even though Disney had given the green light to Jimmy Kimmel Live returning, Nexstar Media Group and Sinclair Broadcast Group, which together operate more than 60 ABC affiliates, stood up, raised their hand, and said, "We're out of here. Don't count us in." They're going to keep preempting the show. In plain English, if you watch your local ABC station in one of these markets, you're not going to see, or you did not see, Jimmy Kimmel last night. And according to their spokesperson, you're not going to see Jimmy Kimmel anytime soon. And good for them, right? Good for them just to stand up to ABC and to Disney and say, he still is not appropriate for our markets. He hasn't apologized. He hasn't changed his view on Donald Trump and the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So why would we want to continue to air him? We took him off for a reason last week. That reason is still there. That's basically what they're saying. Nexstar is the biggest local broadcaster in America. They flat out said they're not putting him back on the air until they have assurances that all parties are committed to respectful, constructive dialogue. Well, I don't think you're going to get that with Jimmy Kimmel, do you? I don't think Jimmy Kimmel, the very fact that ABC and Disney agreed to allow Kimmel back on last night, and by the way, I'm assuming he was on last night. I didn't stay up to watch either. I can't tell you the number of times that I've watched Jimmy Kimmel. I could probably count them on one finger, on one hand, because I'm just not a big fan of Jimmy Kimmel. Not a big fan of late night TV, actually. But to translate what Nexstar said is they don't trust Kimmel not to run his mouth in ways that inflame tensions even further. And Sinclair echoed the move, announcing that they'd swap him out for local news programming pending further discussions with ABC. Again, kudos to these two companies, these two broadcasters, for basically saying, we have public airwaves that we're responsible for, and we want to serve our communities. And thank you, FCC, for licensing us to do so, and we're going to continue to protect our communities because Jimmy Kimmel is just not appropriate for our viewers. Good for them for standing up. Now, let's rewind. This all, of course, started last week when Kimmel accused conservatives of trying to score political points by tying Charlie Kirk's assassin to far-left ideology. Never mind that the FBI officials and Utah's governor both confirmed the shooter, this 22-year-old young man, was steeped in radical leftist politics. Kimmel mocked conservatives, suggested that the shooter, or the accused shooter, might have been a MAGA supporter. And that's when the outrage exploded. Of course, he's saying this because of his hatred of President Donald Trump. Jimmy Kimmel has turned into one of the loudest never-Trumpers, anti-Trumpers. He hates the president. He hates him. And ABC and Disney appear to just go along and let him continue. Shame on them. These two major affiliate owners who yanked him off the air last week, for a brief time there, I think Disney panicked. Of course, you also had the FCC chairman calling Kimmel's comments some of the sickest conducts that he'd heard. Disney, of course, suspended him last week, despite Kimmel's reportedly refusing to apologize. Now, even though Disney says he's back last night, Nexstar and Sinclair saying, nope, not too fast. We're not going to participate. Here's the kicker, though. This isn't just about one late-night host. Nexstar just struck a $6.2 billion deal to acquire Tegna, giving it even more clout in key election year markets like Atlanta, Phoenix, and Portland. Now, quite honestly, I'm not familiar with Tegna, but they're going to add more TV stations, more viewers, more clout. They're flexing their muscle. They're reminding Disney that local broadcasters still hold the keys to what millions of Americans actually see in their living rooms on their TVs. So while liberals cry censorship, conservatives are applauding these affiliate groups for drawing the line. They're brave to do so. You don't get to smear half the country and then waltz back on the air like nothing happened, which is what Jimmy Kimmel did last night. Again, I have no idea what he said last night. I actually don't even care. If some of you watched him and you want to send me a quick text, you want to email me, joey@joeyhudson.com, or leave me a message on the MyPillow message line, 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Leave me a message. Tell me what you think about this. Did you watch him, or will you admit that you watched him? At the end of the day, this fight over Jimmy Kimmel isn't about this comedian. It's about whether Hollywood elites can continue talking down to everyday Americans, you and me, unchecked. They can do whatever they want to. People like Jimmy Kimmel can do whatever he wants to. And whether the other question is whether local stations who are closer to their communities, who live in our communities, who help nonprofits in our communities, whether they will finally actually hold the network accountable. We'll see. And again, no sign that Jimmy Kimmel was backing down. He was still defiant even yesterday afternoon. Did you see the photo that he posted of himself on social media? And this was a direct dig at the whole situation. He posted a photo of the late Norman Lear and himself, who was Lear, let me remind you, was once singled out by former President Richard Nixon as one of his, quote, enemies on Nixon's enemy list. It was a big thing back then. For those of you who didn't live through it, you don't understand it. And, of course, after this week or so of being the center of national political firestorm about free speech and the differences between cancel culture and consequence culture, Kimmel posted this photo, thought it would be cute, I guess. He said after he posted it, he said, "Missing this guy today." And it was the first public comments that he had made since he was yanked off the air last week. And again, you got to remember, Lear was a legendary screenwriter, producer. He died in 2023 at the age of 101. His sitcoms were massively popular in the day, and he touched on some social issues that nobody else was back then. He touched on racism, homosexuality, Some of his hit shows that he created, like All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Good Times, they were hugely successful, but they were kind of taboo at the time on some of the topics that they did. And he didn't care. He didn't care that Nixon had him on his list of people not to come to the White House. And we know about this list of Nixons because it came to light during the Senate Watergate Committee hearings in the summer of 1973 when then White House counsel John Dean disclosed a memo entitled Dealing with Our Political Enemies, and there was a list of people that Richard Nixon did not care for. That was why Jimmy Kimmel posted that photo. That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.